The machines were screaming, doctors shouting orders. Her father, the billionaire Charles Lancaster, frozen by her bedside, his trembling hand clutching the rail. And then, through the chaos, a man in a janitor's uniform pushed past security, tears streaming down his face. He bent close to the unconscious girl and raised his trembling hands. He signed 3 words: "You are beautiful." And just like that, her heart monitor beeped again. Rain hammered against the hospital windows as alarms screamed through the sterile room. Doctors moved like ghosts in a storm, shouting orders that blurred into white noise. Tubes tangled around her fragile arms, her body still beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. Sophia Lancaster, the billionaire's only daughter, lay motionless, her beauty trapped behind silence. The steady beep of the monitor faltered, then stretched into one long, unbroken note. Somewhere in that sound, her father's heart broke. Charles Lancaster stood frozen, his tailored suit drenched in someone else's sweat and tears. "Please, Sophia, please don't leave me," he whispered, his voice cracking like old glass. For all his billions, all his power, he couldn't buy her breath back. Nurses moved around him, but he couldn't hear them, just that deafening tone. His trembling hand brushed her hair back, the way he did when she was 5 and afraid of thunder. But now, thunder lived inside him. "Sir, we need you to step outside," a nurse urged, her voice gentle but firm. Charles didn't move. His knees buckled beneath the weight of everything he couldn't fix. He turned his face upward, a man who once owned the world, now begging the universe for one more heartbeat. "She's all I have," he whispered. "She's all I have." The doctor glanced toward the door. Another minute and they'd call time of death. The door burst open with a crash that silenced the room. A man in a maintenance uniform stumbled in, his eyes red, his chest heaving. "Ethan," a nurse cried, "you can't be in here." But Ethan Moore didn't stop. His gaze went straight to Sophia, the girl who once smiled just for him, the one who had taught him that silence could be beautiful. He took a trembling step forward, his heart breaking and healing at the same time. Charles spun around, fury and despair colliding in his voice. "Who are you? Get him out!" Security moved, but Ethan raised his hands, not in defense, but in language. The kind that needed no sound, only truth. His fingers shook as he began to sign, each motion heavy with love and loss. The doctor hesitated, watching the strange grace of those trembling hands. Even the machines seemed to pause. Ethan's tears dripped onto her bedsheet as he signed the 3 words that had once made her laugh through pain. "You are beautiful." His hands lingered in the air, a silent prayer carved into light. For a moment, there was nothing, only stillness, only heartbreak. And then, a tiny sound, a single beep that sliced through the void. Heads turned. The doctor gasped. The monitor flickered once, then twice, before the steady rhythm returned. Beep, beep, beep. The nurses froze, disbelief painted across their faces. Charles stumbled backward, clutching his chest, tears spilling freely now. Sophia's fingers twitched slightly, a whisper of movement that felt like resurrection. Ethan covered his mouth, choking back a sob as relief and wonder crashed through him. The doctor barked new orders, hope rising like light after a storm. Charles looked at Ethan, eyes wide, voice breaking. What did you just do?" Ethan met his gaze, still trembling, his voice barely a breath. "I just told her the truth." Outside, thunder rolled through the night. But inside, for the first time in months, Sophia's silent world began to breathe again. The hallway outside the ICU buzzed with chaos. Nurses rushing, doctors shouting updates, the sharp smell of antiseptic thick in the air. Charles Lancaster stood frozen in the doorway, watching through glass as his daughter's heart began to beat again. His mind couldn't grasp what he'd just witnessed, a stranger in a janitor's uniform bringing his child back from the edge of death. His breath came in ragged bursts, hands shaking as if his body refused to believe his own eyes. Somewhere deep inside, guilt began to whisper. Maybe love wasn't something you could buy, command, or protect with walls. Inside the room, Ethan stood motionless, his chest rising and falling with disbelief. He couldn't take his eyes off Sophia, still pale but alive, her fingers twitching faintly against the white sheet. For months, he'd seen her fade, the girl trapped in a body that no longer obeyed her, abandoned inside her father's mansion of glass and silence. And yet, in this moment, he felt her spirit flicker back, fragile but real. He didn't know if it was a miracle or just hope refusing to die. All he knew was that she had heard him. Somehow, some way, she had heard him. "Get him out of here!" Charles shouted, voice trembling between rage and confusion. Security rushed forward, gripping Ethan's arms, but he didn't fight. He just looked at Sophia one last time, signing softly through tears, "I'm here." The words hung in the air like a promise, invisible yet louder than any sound. As they dragged him out, Sophia's heart monitor held steady, proof that love could travel through silence. The doctor exhaled deeply, shaking his head. "I don't know what just happened," he murmured, "but it worked." When the door slammed shut behind Ethan, Charles sank into the nearest chair, his body hollowed by exhaustion. The monitors beeped steadily beside him, rhythmic and alive, mocking his disbelief. His trembling hand reached toward his daughter's, small, cold, but real. For the first time in months, she wasn't slipping away. "Sophia," he whispered, voice breaking. "Who is he?" But Sophia couldn't answer, not yet. The only reply was the steady, stubborn sound of her heart continuing to fight. Outside, Ethan stumbled into the corridor, collapsing against the wall. His uniform was soaked with sweat, his face streaked with tears. He slid down to the cold tile floor, burying his face in his hands. "Thank you," he whispered, to no one, to everything. Around him, the world moved on. Stretchers rolled past, announcements echoed, but for Ethan, time stood still. Somewhere behind that glass door, a heartbeat had returned, and with it, the faintest spark of hope. Charles sat alone beside his daughter, the weight of wealth and pride crushing him. He remembered every missed dinner, every time he'd sent her assistant instead of showing up himself. Now, in the sterile hum of the hospital, all those choices echoed back at him. His hand brushed her cheek gently. "I should have learned to speak your language," he whispered, his voice trembling with regret. Maybe then I wouldn't have lost you." His reflection in the window looked like a stranger, a man who'd conquered everything but connection. Hours passed. The chaos outside faded into a soft mechanical lullaby of machines and quiet footsteps. Sophia lay still, her chest rising and falling, her lips parting slightly as if caught in a dream. Charles stayed by her side, too afraid to leave, too proud to cry. He didn't understand what had happened, only that a man with nothing had somehow reached her heart, when he, with everything, could not. The thought burned inside him like shame and awe twisted together. As dawn broke, pale light spilled through the hospital blinds. Charles turned toward the window, watching the city awaken. His city, his empire, built on noise and control. But inside this room, the only thing that mattered was silence. Behind that silence, his daughter's fragile breath whispered a truth he'd never known before. Love doesn't need sound, it only needs to be seen. A year earlier, the Lancaster mansion had been filled with music and laughter. Sophia's voice had once echoed through its marble halls, clear, angelic, alive. She was the darling of charity galas, the face of her father's empire, and the heart of every room she entered. Cameras followed her, reporters adored her, and her father boasted about her every chance he got. But beneath the diamonds and perfect smiles, Sophia was lonely. Every photo captured her beauty, but none ever caught her truth. She was a songbird in a golden cage, and no one ever noticed the bars. Then came that night. November rain pounded the windshield as her driver took the narrow road back from a fundraiser outside the city. She was texting her father, telling him she wished he'd been there, when the headlights swerved. A screech, a crash, and the world shattered into glass and metal. When they pulled her from the wreck, she wasn't breathing. It took 12 minutes to bring her back. 12 minutes that changed everything. When Sophia finally opened her eyes, the world was gone. She couldn't hear the sound of her father crying beside her. She couldn't move her legs. Her lips formed questions no one could understand. In that instant, silence became her prison. Doctors said she was lucky to be alive, but Sophia didn't feel alive. She felt trapped inside her own body, a body that had betrayed her. The girl who once sang now lived in a world where even her own heartbeat was a memory. Charles threw money at the problem the way he always had. Specialists from Switzerland, therapists from Boston, private nurses, soundproof recovery rooms, the newest wheelchairs, anything with a price tag. But none of them could reach her. She refused to eat, to write, to even look at anyone. And when he spoke, shouting words she couldn't hear, she turned her face away. Love became frustration. Father and daughter drifted apart, two lonely souls divided by silence. Months passed. The mansion, once alive with parties and staff, grew cold and quiet. Charles stopped inviting guests, stopped attending meetings. Every night, he stood outside her room, whispering apologies she could never hear. "I'm still here, sweetheart," he'd murmur. But his words died in the air long before they reached her. In the glow of the hallway light, she looked like a ghost, breathing but gone. Sophia spent her days in the glass garden her mother had built before she passed. Surrounded by roses and light, she stared out at the world she could no longer touch. Birds landed near her wheelchair, chirping songs she couldn't hear. Sometimes she imagined what their voices might sound like, remembering melodies from her past. Every evening, when the sun set, she'd close her eyes and feel the vibration of the wind, the only thing that still reminded her she was alive. Charles tried everything to pull her back. He even hired companions, teachers, interpreters, but none lasted long. Sophia's silence made people uncomfortable. They'd speak louder, slower, as if volume could cross the void. Eventually, they gave up. She stopped trying too. Until one ordinary morning, when she noticed a man she'd never seen before fixing the broken fountain outside her window. He was humming. She couldn't hear it, but she could see it. The way his lips moved, the rhythm in his hands. Something about him felt calm, real. And then, for the first time in months, Sophia tilted her head, curious. The man looked up, caught her watching, and smiled. Not the kind of polite smile people gave out of pity, but something gentle, almost familiar. That was the moment Ethan Moore unknowingly stepped into her silent world, and everything began to change. The next morning, Sophia watched from her window again. The man was back, kneeling beside the old marble fountain, sleeves rolled up, sun glinting off the sweat on his arms. There was something different about him. He didn't rush like the others, didn't bark orders into a phone or avoid her gaze. He worked quietly, focused, humming to himself. When he finally looked up and noticed her watching, he didn't turn away. He smiled, soft, genuine, and lifted his hands. Slowly, deliberately, he signed, "Good morning." For a moment, Sophia froze. Her heart stuttered. She blinked, unsure if she'd seen it right. People spoke at her all the time, nurses, doctors, even her father, but no one signed. No one ever tried. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. Her fingers trembled as she raised her hands, rusty from disuse, and replied hesitantly, "You no sign?" The man's eyes softened. He nodded, smiling wider now. "My daughter is deaf too." It felt like a door creaked open inside her chest, one she thought had been sealed forever. She wanted to speak, to ask more, but words had long since become a stranger to her. Instead, she simply smiled back, a small, broken expression that reached her eyes for the first time in months. Ethan, she didn't know his name yet, pointed to the fountain, then to her, and signed, "Almost fixed." She laughed silently, the sound only she could feel, but her shoulders shook from the effort. From that day on, she waited by the window every morning. He'd always find a reason to work nearby, trimming hedges, sweeping paths, checking sprinklers. Each time he greeted her in sign language. Sometimes he'd teach her a new word: flower, friend, hope. The world began to stir around her again, faint colors bleeding into the gray. Even the nurses whispered that Miss Lancaster was smiling. The impossible had begun, quietly, gently, like spring thawing the last snow. One afternoon, Ethan brought a small notebook and held it up to her window. Written in neat, clumsy handwriting were the words, "Do you want to talk?" Her hands pressed against the glass, and she nodded eagerly. He came closer, and they began to sign through the window pane, laughing at their mistakes. It was clumsy and beautiful, a rhythm without sound, a connection without words. For the first time, Sophia felt seen, not as the billionaire's broken daughter, but as a woman, alive, capable, worth listening to. As days turned into weeks, the bond deepened. Ethan told her about his daughter, Lily, a bright 6-year-old who loved painting butterflies and signing stories about the moon. Sophia listened, eyes wide, smiling at every detail. She shared little signs about her mother's garden, her favorite books, the feeling of wind on her face. They built a language of gestures, glances, and warmth, something only they understood. But the world around them noticed. Whispers began to travel down the marble corridors of the Lancaster estate. The billionaire's daughter was smiling again, and the reason wore a maintenance uniform. "It's inappropriate," one of the maids muttered. "Mr. Lancaster won't like this." The tension in the air thickened, invisible but growing. Still, Sophia didn't care. For the first time since her accident, she felt alive. She would wait every day just to see him, to feel that small spark of connection that made her heart remember how to beat. And one evening, as the sun painted gold across the glass walls, Ethan signed to her through the fading light, "You are strong." Sophia's throat tightened, her eyes shining with tears. She signed back slowly, almost shyly, "You make me feel alive." Ethan smiled, pressing a hand to his heart in quiet understanding. Neither of them knew it then, but that simple exchange was where everything truly began. The whispers didn't take long to reach Charles Lancaster. One of the housekeepers, trembling, mentioned it over breakfast. "Sir, your daughter, she's been seen with one of the staff, the maintenance man." The billionaire froze, his spoon halfway to his mouth. "What?" he asked quietly, but there was steel beneath the calm. "Who?" The woman hesitated. "Ethan Moore, sir." Charles said nothing. He simply stood, adjusted his cufflinks, and walked away. That afternoon, he found them. Sophia was in the garden, sunlight warming her pale face. She was laughing, silently, but with her entire being, as Ethan taught her how to sign the word butterfly. Her hands fluttered in the air, alive with grace. For Charles, it was a sight both beautiful and infuriating. He stood at the edge of the marble path, unseen, watching the man in a dirty uniform standing where only family should stand. It wasn't jealousy, it was fear. Fear that someone else could reach her when he could not. When Ethan noticed him, he froze mid-sign. "Mr. Lancaster," he said quietly, stepping back. Charles's voice cut through the still air. "You're done here." Sophia's smile vanished. Panic filled her eyes as she began signing frantically. "No, please, he's my friend." But Charles didn't understand. He couldn't read her language, couldn't see the desperation in her trembling hands. "Take your things and leave," he said, turning away as she reached toward him, her silent plea breaking against his indifference. That night, the house was silent again, the kind of silence that hurts. Sophia sat by her window, staring at the dark garden where Ethan used to stand. The fountain he'd fixed kept flowing, its water shimmering under moonlight, but it sounded like nothing to her now. Her fingers traced the sign for friends against her chest over and over as tears slipped down her cheeks. She had no voice to scream with, so she cried in silence, the only sound she knew anymore. Across town, Ethan sat in his small apartment with his daughter Lily curled up beside him. "Daddy, are you sad?" she signed, her big eyes full of worry. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "A little." Lily tilted her head, then reached out and signed, "When Mommy died, you told me sad doesn't last forever." He smiled weakly. "I did, didn't I?" She nodded, then wrapped her small arms around his neck. "Then you'll be okay too." He held her tightly, but his thoughts drifted back to the girl in the glass mansion, the one who had smiled again because of him. In the Lancaster estate, Sophia grew weaker. She refused her meals, her therapy. The nurses whispered that she was fading again, a flower wilting in gold. Charles noticed, but didn't understand. He brought in new specialists, more doctors, more machines. None of it worked. The light in her eyes was gone. He told himself it was grief, exhaustion, depression, anything but his own doing. He couldn't see that love, once found, cannot be replaced with luxury. Ethan tried to move on, but every time he saw his daughter signing the words beautiful or hope, he saw Sophia's hands doing the same. Finally, one cold night, he made a decision. "Come on, kiddo," he told Lily softly, helping her into her coat. "We're going for a walk." They stopped outside the Lancaster gates. He looked up at the mansion, silent, enormous, and aching, and whispered, "I just need to know she's okay." Inside, Sophia sat in her wheelchair by the fountain, pale and thin, staring at the stars she couldn't hear. And in that same moment, beyond the gates, Ethan looked up too, the distance between them filled with everything left unsaid. He raised his hand slowly, signing toward the dark windows. "You're not alone." He didn't know if she would see, but deep inside the mansion, Sophia's heart stirred, faintly, as if she somehow did. The winter wind screamed outside the hospital, rattling the windows like a warning. Inside, the air was heavy, the kind of silence that feels too loud. Sophia lay still beneath the white sheets, her skin pale as moonlight, the machines beside her whispering numbers that didn't mean much anymore. Her condition had worsened quickly. The doctor said she was slipping away. No response, no fight, no reason left to live. Charles sat beside her, his hand gripping hers, but her fingers didn't move. He'd bought her everything money could offer, but not what she needed most, understanding. In the hallway, Ethan stood, arguing with a nurse. "Please," he begged, "just let me see her." His voice cracked, desperate. "She knows me, she hears me." The nurse shook her head. "Sir, family only." He pressed a trembling hand against the wall, fighting back tears. Lily tugged at his sleeve, signing softly, "She's scared, go help her." He looked down at his daughter, his heart shattering at the thought of another little girl alone in the dark. "I have to try," he whispered. When Charles stepped into the hallway, their eyes met. The billionaire's face was pale, hollowed by fear. "What are you doing here?" he asked coldly, though his voice wavered. "You've done enough." Ethan took a step forward. "Please, Mr. Lancaster, I can help her." Charles' composure cracked for a moment, rage, grief, and guilt battling in his eyes. "Help?" he spat. "You think waving your hands is going to save her?" Ethan swallowed hard, his voice trembling. It already did once. A nurse ran out suddenly. "Sir, her heart rate's dropping." Charles turned toward the door, panic flooding his face. The doctor's voice echoed from inside. "We're losing her." He stumbled forward, but before he could reach the room, Ethan pushed past him. Security shouted, but Charles didn't stop them this time. Maybe he'd finally realized that this man, this maintenance worker with trembling hands, might be the only one who truly knew how to reach her. Inside, the flat line filled the air like a scream. Ethan's chest tightened as he saw her, lifeless again, her face peaceful but too still. He fell to his knees beside the bed, tears spilling freely. "Sophia," he whispered, his voice breaking, "I'm here." He took her hand gently, his thumb tracing the edge of her palm, and lifted his trembling fingers into the air. The doctors watched in stunned silence as he began to sign, slowly, deliberately, like a prayer. "You are beautiful." Each motion was soft, reverent, a memory, a plea, a promise. The air hung still, every eye fixed on him. Charles stood frozen by the doorway, tears streaming down his face, his entire empire crumbling into helplessness. And then, a sound. A fragile, impossible beep. Heads turned toward the monitor. One beat, then another. The flat line curved into life. "She's back," the doctor shouted. Nurses scrambled, disbelief flashing across their faces. Ethan covered his mouth, choking back a sob. His body shook as relief poured through him like light. He looked up at Charles, his voice breaking. "You see, she just needed to be heard." Charles couldn't speak. He simply nodded, tears streaming silently down his cheeks. He fell to his knees beside Ethan, gripping his shoulder, whispering the words that pride had long kept buried. "Thank you." And as the machines continued their steady rhythm, Sophia's hand twitched weakly, her fingers brushing against Ethan's palm. Her eyelids fluttered, and a single tear slid down her cheek. In that moment, no one in the room dared to breathe. The billionaire and the janitor stood side by side, both men broken, both men praying. And in the quiet hum of life returning, the world learned something that day. That love doesn't always need sound to be heard. The morning sun spilled gently through the hospital blinds, soft and golden. Sophia blinked slowly, her lashes fluttering like the wings of something reborn. The world was still silent, but it was alive again. The first thing she saw was her father, slumped in a chair beside her bed, his eyes red, a small sign language dictionary open in his lap. His suit was wrinkled, his pride gone. When he realized she was awake, he gasped, stumbling to his feet. His lips trembled as he raised his hands, clumsy, uncertain, and signed, "I love you." Sophia's eyes filled instantly. Her fingers moved slowly, weak but graceful, as she replied, "I know." The moment hung there, fragile and eternal. Charles reached for her hand, his touch trembling. "I should have learned sooner," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I thought money could fix everything, but I couldn't even talk to my own daughter." She smiled softly, the corners of her lips curving like light breaking through clouds. There was no anger, no blame, only forgiveness written in silence. Across the room, Ethan stood quietly, Lily's small hand in his. He didn't want to intrude, but Sophia saw him, and her entire face brightened. She lifted her hand slightly and signed, "Thank you." Ethan shook his head, smiling through tears. "No," he whispered, signing back, "you saved yourself." Lily climbed onto the chair beside her father and signed shyly, "Hi, Sophia." Sophia smiled at the little girl, signing back, "Hi, beautiful." For a moment, the room was filled with the purest kind of conversation, one that made no sound, yet spoke volumes. Weeks passed, and recovery came slowly, like dawn over water. Sophia learned to move her arms again, to breathe on her own, to feel the warmth of sunlight on her skin. Her father visited every day, never missing a therapy session, learning to sign one word at a time. Sorry, proud, love. Sometimes they didn't need words at all, just a shared look, a held hand, a second chance neither thought they'd ever get. The mansion no longer echoed with emptiness. It echoed with laughter, silent but full. One afternoon, by the same fountain where their story began, Sophia sat wrapped in a blanket. Ethan arrived with Lily, carrying a tray of hot cocoa. "Doctor's orders," he joked softly, setting it down beside her. Sophia smiled, signing, "I missed this place." Ethan nodded, looking around at the sunlight dancing on the water. "It missed you too." For a long time, they said nothing, just listened to the soundless peace between them. Then, softly, she lifted her hands and signed, "You changed my life." Ethan's eyes glistened as he signed back, "You changed mine first." He looked at her the way he always had, not with pity, but with admiration. The kind of gaze that said, "You are seen, you are enough." Lily giggled and signed, "Kiss already." Both adults laughed, Sophia blushing as Ethan ruffled his daughter's hair. It was a moment so normal, so human, that it felt miraculous, proof that even broken hearts can find rhythm again. Charles watched from the window of the house, a faint smile softening his face. For the first time in years, his home wasn't a museum of grief. It was alive, silent but full. One afternoon, by the same fountain where their story began, Sophia sat wrapped in a blanket. Ethan arrived with Lily, carrying a tray of hot cocoa. "Doctor's orders," he joked softly, setting it down beside her. Sophia smiled, signing, "I missed this place." Ethan nodded, looking around at the sunlight dancing on the water. "It missed you too." For a long time, they said nothing, just listened to the soundless peace between them. Then, softly, she lifted her hands and signed, "You changed my life." Ethan's eyes glistened as he signed back, "You changed mine first." He looked at her the way he always had, not with pity, but with admiration. The kind of gaze that said, "You are seen, you are enough." Lily giggled and signed, "Kiss already." Both adults laughed, Sophia blushing as Ethan ruffled his daughter's hair. It was a moment so normal, so human, that it felt miraculous, proof that even broken hearts can find rhythm again. Charles watched from the window of the house, a faint smile softening his face. For the first time in years, his home wasn't a museum of grief. It was alive. He turned to the portrait of his late wife and whispered, "She's smiling again." And maybe, just maybe, somewhere beyond that silence, his wife smiled too. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't come with thunder or light. They come with quiet hands, patient hearts, and love that refuses to give up. Sophia learned to live again, not through sound, but through understanding. And in the language of silence, she found her voice. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and share it with someone who still believes that love can heal even the deepest silence.